Your hand is on a carton of eggs and you're not looking at the price. That's it. That's the whole moment. No siren, no confetti, no one clapping. Just your hand, the eggs, and the fact that for the first time in 6 years, you didn't flip the carton over to check the sticker. You notice it a half second after it happens. You actually stop walking. Right there in aisle 4, next to a woman arguing with her toddler about cereal, you stand still and realize something has changed in you without asking permission first. Polly, you used to know the price of everything. Eggs 4.89. Ground beef, $6.20 a pound if it wasn't on sale, $4.99 if you timed it right and got there Tuesday morning before the good stuff was gone. You knew gas station prices down the street from memory, knew which one was 11 cents cheaper, knew it was worth the extra turn. You knew because you had to know. There was a version of you, not long ago, barely 3 years, who sat in a parked car outside this same store and did math in his head before going in. Not big math. Small, humiliating math. Can I get the eggs and the bread, or is it eggs or bread? That kind of math. Nobody tells you what that does to a person. The quiet tax of always calculating. It's not the missing money that wears you down. It's the fact that some part of your brain is always running the numbers, even when you're supposed to be present, even when your daughter is asking you something and you're half listening because you're doing subtraction in your head. There's a specific kind of exhaustion in that one nobody warns you about. It's not physical. You could sleep 9 hours and still wake up tired because the calculating doesn't stop for sleep. It just picks back up the second your eyes open before you've even had coffee, before you've said a word to anyone. Rent is due the 1st. Card payment is due the 14th. The car needs an oil change you've been pushing back 3 weeks past when it should have happened. All of it sitting there quiet, humming underneath every normal moment of your day like a second job you never applied for. You remember calling out sick once. Not because you were sick, but because you needed one day where your brain wasn't doing that math and you spent the whole day doing it anyway, just somewhere else. That's how you knew it wasn't really about the job. It was about the numbers living inside you, uninvited, permanent. You put the eggs in the cart. You don't check the milk either. You grab the good coffee, not the store brand, and you don't flinch. 3 years ago, this would have been impossible to imagine. You were 31,47,000 in the hole between 2 credit cards and a car loan that felt like a leash, and the only plan you had was hope. Hope isn't a plan. You learned that the hard way in a Wednesday night parking lot conversation with your wife where neither of you cried because you were both too tired to cry and you just sat there with the engine off listening to it tick as it cooled. That night is the one you think about now standing in aisle 4. Not because it was dramatic, because it was the moment you stopped waiting for something to save you. You'd been waiting, if you're honest. Waiting for a bonus. Waiting for a promotion that kept getting mentioned and never materializing. Waiting for some version of luck that people talked about at work. Someone's uncle who left them money. Someone's stock that tripled. You'd built a quiet little fantasy that rescue was coming from outside, and every month it didn't come was another month you felt a little more foolish for expecting it. Your wife said something that night you've never repeated to anyone, not even her, because saying it back to her would feel like handing her a weapon. She said, "I don't think anyone's coming, Polly. I think it's just us." She wasn't being cruel. She was being the only honest person in the car. And something about hearing it out loud in that flat, tired voice did what 6 years of vague worry hadn't managed to do. It made the problem real enough to actually solve. Here's what nobody put in a book for you. The turn wasn't one big decision. It was 3 specific ones stacked close together that most people talk themselves out of. The first was ugly and small. You called your credit card company and asked flat out for a lower interest rate, expecting nothing. They dropped it 4 points because you asked. 4 points on 19,000 of real money. $760 a year you'd been leaking without knowing it. You'd never asked because you didn't think you were allowed to. The second was the one that actually hurt. You sold the truck. Not because you hated it, because the $612 payment was strangling you every month, and a used sedan with 9,000 miles on it cost $9,400 cash paid, outright no payment at all. Your brother-in-law made a joke about it at Thanksgiving. You let him. You didn't need the truck to prove anything anymore. The third one is the one that actually changed the math for good. You picked up the extra shift nobody wanted. Sunday mornings, 6 to 2 at time and a half. And instead of letting that money touch your checking account, you had it routed straight into a high-yield savings account before you ever saw it. $340 a month gone before it could be spent, sitting there earning 4.6% instead of nothing. None of that felt big while it was happening. It felt like scraping. It felt some weeks like it wasn't working at all. There was a stretch month, 7 or 8, where you almost quit the whole plan. The transmission on the sedan started making a sound you didn't like, and the quote to fix it was $1240. Money that would have wiped out 4 months of the extra shift in one afternoon. You remember standing in the repair shop parking lot, phone in hand, thinking about just putting it on the credit card, going back to the way things were, because at least that way was familiar. Familiar and broken felt safer than new and uncertain. You didn't put it on the card. You paid it from what you'd saved, watched the number drop, and felt something close to grief watching it happen. But it didn't go to zero. That was the difference. 6 months earlier, that repair would have wiped you out completely. This time, it just knocked you back a step and you kept walking. Your coworkers noticed the shift before your family did in a strange way. You stopped joining the Friday lunch orders that ran $18 a plate. Someone made a comment, not mean, just curious, about you bringing lunch from home now. You let it sit there without explaining yourself. You didn't owe anyone the math. That was its own kind of freedom, the ability to just let people wonder instead of narrating your finances to justify a sandwich. But money does something strange when you stop touching it. It compounds in silence. You don't feel it building the way you feel a paycheck landing. There's no moment where it announces itself. You just look up one day, 18 months later, and the number that used to be negative has a plus sign in front of it. That's the part people skip when they talk about getting ahead. They want the after photo, the vacation, the house, the new watch. Nobody shows you the 18 months in between where nothing looks different from the outside, where you're still driving the same used sedan, still packing the same lunch, still doing the math out of habit, even after you don't have to anymore. Now here's where it gets interesting. Can you guess what the number actually was the day you checked and it finally clicked? 61000. Not from one windfall. Not from a bonus or an inheritance or a lucky break. From 3 unglamorous decisions and 18 months of not touching what you didn't have to touch. Your wife found out before you did, actually. She's the one who does the spreadsheet, has for years quietly the way some people keep a garden. She showed you the number on a Tuesday night at the kitchen table, turned the laptop around, and didn't say anything. She just watched your face. You didn't cry. You wanted to. You just sat there for a second, the way you'd sat in that parking lot 3 years earlier, except this time the silence felt different, full instead of empty. You asked her to say the number again out loud, because seeing it on a screen and hearing a human voice say it were 2 different kinds of real. She said it again, 61000. Then she laughed a little, the way people laugh when they don't know what else to do with a feeling that big, and said, "We did that on Sunday shifts in a used Honda." When you said it back like that plainly, it almost sounded made up. It wasn't made up. It was 18 months stacked one unremarkable week at a time. Most people stop here. The ones who don't are the ones who actually change things. You didn't stop. You took half of it, not all half, and put it into a retirement account, the kind you'd ignored for a decade because $7,000 a year felt like a number for other people who already had it figured out. Turns out you didn't need to have it figured out. You just needed to start at 34 later than you wanted, earlier than you'd have started if you'd waited for the right time that never actually arrives on its own. The other half stayed liquid. Not for a trip. Not for a car. For breathing room. The kind of number where an unexpected 1800 transmission repair doesn't detonate your whole month. That's a different kind of rich than people picture. It's not yachts. It's a mechanic handing you a bill and your pulse staying exactly where it was. You think about that as you push the cart toward the checkout, about how the actual texture of having money isn't excitement. It's the absence of a specific familiar dread. It's not flipping the carton over. It's small and it's everything. The next one on this list is the one nobody talks about, and it's the most powerful. It's not the number in the account. It's what stops happening in your head once the number is there. You stop rehearsing conversations with the electric company. You stop doing that thing where you mentally subtract before you've even parked the cart. You stop somewhere around month 20 waking up at 3 a.m. running numbers that don't need running anymore. Your daughter asked you last week if you were rich. You laughed because you're not. Not by the definition she probably means, not by the definition your brother-in-law with the new truck means either. But you told her something you actually believe. Rich isn't a house or a truck. Rich is not flinching. Rich is buying the eggs and not turning the carton over. She didn't understand that yet. She's 7. But she will eventually the same way you finally did. Not in a single dramatic moment, but in the accumulated weight of 1,000 small mornings where the flinch just wasn't there anymore. You think too about what this means further out. Not this year, but the one after and the one after that. The retirement account you started at 34 isn't going to feel real for a long time. $7,000 a year growing quietly at something close to the S&P's long-run average doesn't look like much on a Tuesday. But you've done the math, the good kind of math now, the kind you choose to do instead of the kind that used to choose you. And by the time you're 60, that quiet, unglamorous discipline turns into something that would have sounded imaginary to the man in the parking lot. You're not chasing a lottery ticket. You're letting time do what time does if you just stop interrupting it. Compare that to the version of you sitting in that parking lot. Same person. Same job for the first 2 years of this. Completely different result. Not because anything outside of you changed, but because 3 specific choices made on 3 unremarkable days quietly rewired what your mornings feel like. Your brother-in-law still has the new truck. 58000 sticker, $890 a month, 4 years left on the note. He posted a photo of it last week, washed and gleaming in his driveway, and you felt something you didn't expect. Not envy, not superiority either. Just a quiet clarity that you two were simply playing different games now and you'd finally figured out which one you actually wanted to win. He might never know what the account with your name on it looks like. You're not going to tell him. Some things don't need an audience to be real. You're not done. 61000 isn't a finish line, and you know that better than anyone. You've watched people hit a number and relax too early, watch the relaxing undo the progress. But you're also not who you were. That's the part that matters standing here in aisle 4 with a carton of eggs you didn't have to think twice about. Here's what you'd tell the version of you in that parking lot if you could reach back 3 years and say one thing through the glass. It's not going to feel like winning while it's happening. It's going to feel like scraping for longer than feels fair. There will be a transmission that almost breaks you a Friday lunch. You'll quietly skip a brother-in-law's truck that will make you doubt yourself for exactly one afternoon. None of that is the story. It's just the middle of it. And then one Tuesday, your wife is going to turn a laptop around and you're going to realize the scraping was the whole plan working exactly the way it was supposed to all along, even on the weeks it looked like nothing was happening at all. You put the coffee in the cart, you head for the register, and for the first time in longer than you can remember, you're not doing math. You're just buying groceries like a person who isn't afraid of the number at the end. That's the morning you stopped checking price tags. It didn't announce itself. It just quietly arrived the way real change always does. Not with fireworks, but with your hand on a carton of eggs, steady, unbothered, finally, completely yours. Somewhere across town, there's a version of you from 3 years ago sitting in a parked car with the engine ticking as it cools, thinking hope isn't a plan. He's right. It isn't. But he's closer than he thinks to becoming the man standing in aisle 4, and he doesn't even know it yet.